So on we go. First off, that global fight I mentioned, it really is one centered on the extraordinary pace of change. What seemed like the white heat of technology one day can the very next feel as old and as outdated as the phrase white heat of technology. Now no company is too big to fail. Netscape once looked invincible until it went the way of CompuServe. And I bet there are some older members of the audience here tonight who remember Microsoft. Now, my first experience of how quickly the generations adapt their viewing habits was 18 years ago when I took my son, who was about 3, to the cinema for the first time. And we went to see a long and execrable film called Flubber. And as we came out, I asked him what he thought, and he said, it was good. It was like a big video you can only see once. And from that focus group of 1, I determined 2 things. Firstly, children are acutely aware of the limitations of their viewing environment. But secondly, it doesn't seem to spoil their enjoyment of what they're watching. As long as the content is good, they'll put up with much. This is good news for those of us who make quality programs. People will hunt them out by any means possible and on whichever device is available. Hence, Amazon and Netflix and now YouTube pouring money into generating new content. That's the good news for the creative industry. Everyone wants to make television. The bad news is everyone wants to make television. Cheaper, user-friendly technology means we're living in both the golden age of TV and a global bucket of swill. For every Sherlock and Breaking Bad, there's 1 billion more people filming their brother squirt baked beans from his nose and anus. So, in this cacophony, it's more important than ever that we have strong, popular channels, highly respected for their quality, that act as beacons, drawing audiences to the best content available, and providing a confident home for the best program makers. Faced with a global audience now, British television needs its champion supporters. It needs its cheerleaders. Who will they be? The government? Not while they consistently talk of reining in our greatest network. The broadcasters? Not while most of their energies are dissipated fighting off political attacks on their impartiality or finances. Now, of course, our friends in Whitehall would argue that as the BBC's charter comes up for renewal, it's important to see how the corporation can operate even more effectively. I'd argue back that starting a debate on how the BBC should be funded just days after lopping 20% off its budget without discussion seems pretty much to me like shutting the stable door after the horse has been bolt-gunned. But never mind, let's assume the horse is still alive and revival is a real possibility, even though, for obvious reasons, Rolf's Animal Hospital has been incinerated. So I'm going to do some cheerleading of my own. I'm not an expert. I don't run a network. I've never consciously multi-platformed. I've worked with Channel 4, Sky Atlantic, and HBO, but I started with the BBC. I've always had a relationship with it, and I feel I owe it my professional life. Now, that life really began as a listener, hooked on brilliant comedy shows on Radio 4 like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and Saturday Night Fry, with Stephen Fry. Tremendously idiosyncratic comedies that I thought were magical. I knew then that making shows like that was the only thing I wanted to do. I actually started my professional career as the world's uncoolest music presenter on Radio Scotland, but given generous encouragement, soon became a comedy producer for BBC Radio at Broadcasting House, the very epicenter of the radio shows that had inspired me. So imagine how I felt when my first letter from a listener arrived. It was a complaint, and it ended with the words, "And Iannucci." what sort of a name is that for someone who works for the so-called British Broadcasting Corporation? I pinned it to the front door of my office. Blooded, I was quickly on the first rung of the ladder of BBC management, becoming the LE department's script editor. I lasted 2 months. Not because of a scandal, but because I couldn't take myself seriously in a tie. Eventually, and this is absolutely true, when the then Bishop of Oxford objected to a midnight joke about the crucifixion on Radio 1, and I was told to apologise, I felt it was time to move on. Not for me managing the BBC's tortuous relationship with the establishment. I decided life was too short to deal with bishoprics. I'll take that as a cue for some water. Management, I was expecting champagne, didn't spot I had champagne. Management wasn't my style, but neither was business. When I went freelance, the one thing I knew I didn't want to do was set up my own company. I wanted to make comedy, not make people redundant because we weren't making enough comedy. Occasionally, as I watched friends and colleagues become channel controllers and multimillionaires, I asked myself if I did the right thing. But I always answer yes. In that time, I've seen channel controllers go, fortunes lost, budgets slashed, and producers punched. I've also watched TV executives perform a merry kaleidoscope in front of me as they've risen to the top of one thing and then another. There's about 20 of them whose names I've grown used to hearing over the years, whom I've never actually encountered, but whom I assume are very, very good, given they only need a couple of years to do their job before moving on to the next one. They must be essential components of the TV industry. After all, each new initiative, each new reform or inquiry into how British television conducts itself throws up one of these individuals onto its committee as regularly as the dawn.